everyone and welcome to this video lecture, and in this video lecture I will be discussing previous year's NEET questions, and along with that there will be discussions after every question. And this is for the chapter, as you can see on your screen, breathing and exchange of gases. This is part 3. Okay, so if you haven't watched the previous parts you can do so, and I will also put the link in the description box. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so here is our first question. A large proportion of oxygen remains unused in the human blood even after its uptake by the body tissues. This oxygen, okay, and this appeared in 2006. Let's look at our options. A. Acts as a reserve during muscular exercise. B. Raises the PCO2 of blood to 75 mm of mercury. C. Is enough to keep oxyhemoglobin saturation to 96%. D. Helps in releasing more O2 to the epithelial tissues. As you have seen my previous videos, you would know I would be saying that pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer and then come back to this video. Okay, so we have our options A, B and C and D, and A. Acts as a reserve during muscular exercise. Yes, that is possible, that is true. B. Raises the PCO2 of blood to 75 mm of mercury. No, I don't think so. No, that is not the right answer. C. Is enough to keep oxyhemoglobin saturation to 96%. No. Helps in releasing more O2 to the epithelial tissues. Again, no. So the right answer is A. So if you have written down A, that is your correct answer. Okay, so let's look at the discussion. So, as we all know, and if you read your NCERT notes, a normal person has 15 grams of hemoglobin per 100 ml of blood, and 1 gram of hemoglobin binds to about 1.34 ml of oxygen. Okay, that's a fact and it will be there in your NCERT book. Thus, on average, 100 ml of blood carries 20 ml of oxygen in arterial blood. Okay, how did we get that number? That's 15 into 1.34, which is approximately equal to 20 ml. Okay. Now, under normal conditions, that means when we are at rest, okay, about 5 ml of oxygen is transported to tissues by 100 ml of blood. Okay, that means 5 ml of oxygen is going into the tissues. Okay, this is at rest. So the levels drop in the venous blood. It goes down to approximately 14.4 ml in 100 ml of blood, venous blood. Understand? It's quite simple. That means about 25% of oxygen is consumed by the tissue during that time. Okay, so if you have your blood flow here and you have your tissues here, okay, 5 ml goes in and the rest is what, 14.4 ml of blood goes out like this. So 5 ml is moving in to the tissues. Okay, I'll erase this part. Erased everything, no problem. So during muscular exercise, okay, now this is at rest, what I explained to you. That means 25% of oxygen is consumed by the tissues. This is at rest. So during muscular exercise, for example, suddenly you need to run. Okay, you need to go somewhere, you need to do some kind of muscular exercise, strenuous exercise. For that you need more oxygen, right? So then where is that oxygen going to come from? That means already we have 20 ml of oxygen in the arterial blood. Okay, so during muscular exercise, what happens is PO2 levels drop from 40 mm mercury to 15 mm mercury. Okay, this drops, and also there is an increase in temperature on muscle cells. So this results in dissociation of oxygen into the cells, which is about 15 ml in 100 ml of blood flow, and that is about 75%. Okay, so during a muscular exercise, there is a drop in the PO2 levels. Yeah, PO2 levels in the tissues, and increase in temperature. So this allows for dissociation. Okay, and if you need to understand more about dissociation or what I'm talking about, please refer to oxygen dissociation curve. It's there in NCERT, and also Bose effect. Also Bose effect. Okay, so that is why it acts as a reserve during muscular exercise. This is actually a good question, so this deserves a smiley face. This wasn't direct. If you notice that this wasn't very direct, you had to apply a little bit of logic into this question. Okay, so you had to think very carefully. You need to know your syllabus, your theory very well, and you should have understood your theory to be able to answer a question. Okay, so this was a smiley face question. Okay, I hope you've understood this, and we'll move on to the next question. All right. Bulk of CO2 released from body tissues into the blood is present as, okay, and this appeared in 2011. Let's look at our options A, B, C, and D. Again, I would suggest you pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer, and then we will come back. A. Bicarbonate in blood plasma and RBCs. Yes, bicarbonate in blood plasma and RBCs is the bulk of carbon dioxide released from body tissue into the blood. Free CO2 in blood plasma. No. 70% carbaminohemoglobin and 30% as bicarbonate. No. Carbaminohemoglobins in RBCs. No. So the right answer is A, like I said, bicarbonate in blood plasma and RBCs. Okay, let's look at the discussion. This I think was pretty direct. So we know 7% of CO2 is dissolved in blood plasma. Please remember this. These are facts that you need to remember. So you notice that this keeps appearing in the exam. That means it's an important piece of information. We know 70% of CO2 is converted into bicarbonate ions and transported in the blood plasma. So what happens is carbon dioxide diffuses into the RBCs, okay, and combines with water to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is an unstable compound. This is carbonic acid here. Okay, it's an unstable compound. It has a tendency to quickly dissociate into HCO3 minus and H plus. Okay, so once this HCO3 minus is formed, this moves from the erythrocytes into the plasma in exchange with chloride ions. That's called chloride shift. Okay, this is called chloride shift. Okay, so 70% of carbon dioxide is converted into bicarbonate ions and transported in the blood plasma. Okay, and we have 23% of carbon dioxide which is carried by hemoglobin. Okay, so this was direct. You needed to remember these facts. This part is very important. You know, this thing keeps appearing over and over again. So this is a very important piece of information. You need to understand how this system works, how the CO2 is transported. Okay, I hope you've understood. We move on to the next question. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Question number 3. What is true about RBCs in humans? Okay, and this appeared in 2010. So let's look at our options. A. They carry about 20 to 25% of CO2. They transport 99.5% of O2. They transport about 80% oxygen only, and the rest 20% of it is transported in dissolved state in blood plasma. D. They do not carry CO2 at all. Okay, so we have our options, and Please pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer, okay, and then come back to this video. Okay, so what is true about RBCs in humans? It has to be A. They carry about 20 to 25% of CO2. Okay, but the rest of them is not true. They don't carry 99.5% of O2. Then they don't transport about 80% oxygen, and then rest 20% of it is transported in dissolved state in blood plasma. That is also not true. And they do not carry CO2 at all. That is also untrue. So the correct answer is A. Okay, let's look at the discussion. Okay, so 23% of CO2 is carried by hemoglobin in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. So CO2 directly reacts with amine radicals to form this compound. Okay, so CO2 binds with the hemoglobin, the globin chain, amine radicals, and they form this compound GB. Yeah. Okay, so 7% of carbon dioxide is transported in the blood plasma. Okay. %7 of CO2 is transported in the blood plasma. Okay. And 70% of CO2 is transported in the form of bicarbonate ions. Again, if you notice, you come across the same information, right, that we previously discussed. So, I mean, this is very, very, very important. Okay, this, you need to remember this fact. Hands down, there is no doubt about it. Okay, you need to remember this piece of information, but this has appeared over and over again. Okay, so this was a direct question. This shouldn't have been a problem to answer. If you knew all your facts right about how much O2 and how much CO2 is transported in RBCs and in the blood, you should have been able to answer this question easily. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next question. Okay. The hemoglobin of a human fetus, and this appeared in 2009. Let's look at our options. We have A, B, C, and D. Okay. A has only 2 protein subunits instead of 4. Has a higher affinity for O2 than that of an adult. Has a lower affinity for O2 than that of the adult. Its affinity for O2 is the same as that of an adult. Okay, again, I would suggest you pause the video and write down what you think is the right option here and come back to this video. Okay, so first one, has only 2 protein subunits instead of 4. No, that is incorrect. Has a higher affinity for oxygen than that of an adult. Yes, that is correct. Has a lower affinity for oxygen than that of the adult. No. And its affinity for oxygen is same as that of an adult. Also incorrect. So your answer should have been B. Okay, so your answer should have been B. Okay, so let's look at the discussion. Alright, so you have a graph here to represent the saturation of hemoglobin against the PO2. Okay, for maternal, that is the mother's hemoglobin, and the fetal hemoglobin. So you can see the mother's hemoglobin over here, the black line, and the fetal hemoglobin is higher. Okay, it is higher. That means even at low PO2 levels, that means if the PO2 level is only around like 22 or 23, the saturation would be around this much, 40%, right? It would still be higher as compared to the maternal. If the maternal PO2 would be around, if the PO2 maternal hemoglobin would be around 22 again, then it would be less than the fetal hemoglobin, saturation hemoglobin. Okay, here the curve for hemoglobin is shifted to the left of that of maternal hemoglobin. This means that at low PO2 levels also there's a high saturation of oxygen to the hemoglobin, like I've already discussed. So you can see the shift over here, and this causes a higher saturation. Okay, this is a property of the fetal hemoglobin. Please remember that this is a very important property of the fetal hemoglobin. Also, another fact, Another fact is that the hemoglobin concentration of fetal blood is 50% more than that of the mother. That is another reason why there's a higher affinity for the fetal hemoglobin to the oxygen as compared to the maternal hemoglobin. Okay, this is another fact that the fetal blood is 50% more in number than that of the concentration than that of the mother. Okay, so first one is that there's a shift. So at lower PO2 levels also there will be a high saturation, and the other reason is that there's 50% more concentration of hemoglobin. Okay, so these are the reasons why. What was the question that we had? That the reason why hemoglobin of the human fetus has a higher affinity for oxygen than that of an adult. Okay, so this was actually a factual based question. So if you knew how the human fetus behaves and what are the properties, you should have been able to answer this question quite easily. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay. The majority of CO2 produced by our body cells is transported to the lungs as, and this appeared in 2006. Let's look at our options. Attached again, sorry, before I move on, please pause the video and think write what you think is the right answer, and then come back to this video. Okay, so we have option A, attached to hemoglobin, dissolved in the blood. C, as bicarbonates. D, as carbonates. Again, if you watched the previous question, the previous videos, you would know exactly what information I'm talking about over here. So the majority of CO2 is transported to the lungs as bicarbonates. So answer C. C should have clearly been your answer. There shouldn't have been any doubt. Okay. Let's look at the discussion. Again, 23% of CO2 is carried by hemoglobin. That means it attaches to the amine radicals, okay, to form the compound. 7% is transported in the blood plasma, and 70% is in the form of bicarbonate ions. So your answer should have been bicarbonate ions, hands down, no doubt. So again, let me remind you, this is an important piece of information that you guys have to remember, right? Let's move on to the next question. Okay, question number 6. Hemoglobin is a type of, and this appeared in 1999. Let's look at our options A, B, C, and D. Again, pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer and come back to this video. Okay. And I guess I shouldn't be reminding you over and over again. By now, you should have known what the practice is over here. Okay. A. We have carbohydrate. No. B. Respiratory pigment. Yes. B is the right answer. C. Vitamin. No. D. Skin pigment. No. So it is clearly B. If you are studying respiration, you would have clearly understood that hemoglobin is a respiratory pigment. Okay, let's look at the discussion. Okay, hemoglobin monomer. Okay, a hemoglobin monomer consists of 4 pyrrole rings forming protoporphyrin. It includes Fe2 plus ions and a globin chain. Okay, so I'll show you a diagrammatic representation. So you have 4 pyrrole rings. Okay, they look like this. The 4 pyrrole rings, and they combine. So this is pyrrole, and they combine to form protoporphyrin. Okay. Now you have your Fe2 plus ion in between and a globin chain. This is the globin chain. Okay, So now what you see here in front of you, this whole structure is actually a monomer. It's actually a monomer, okay, what I've explained to you. Four of these monomers, they combine to form the hemoglobin molecule. Okay, four of these monomers, I mean there'll be four like this, 1 2 3 4. Four of these monomers, they combine to form the whole hemoglobin molecule. This is what the hemoglobin actually looks like. The four of these together to form the whole hemoglobin molecule. Okay, yeah, so four of these monomers combine to form a hemoglobin molecule. Right? Understood? I hope that is clear to you. That was very simple. So this protoporphyrin, Fe2 plus ion and a global chain, they form the monomer, and four of these combine together to form a hemoglobin molecule. Now there are four different types of globin chain. Now the chain that I showed you is alpha, beta, gamma and delta. Okay, there are four types that are present. Okay, alpha, beta, gamma and delta. Now the common form in adult human beings is hemoglobin A. So the hemoglobin A molecule is in the adult human being is the most common form that is found, and it contains 2 alpha and 2 beta globin chains. Okay, that means if you have what it looks like essentially is like a flower. So you have this alpha, you have Fe2 plus ion inside, and you have the protoporphyrin. Okay, so you have one monomer which contains an alpha chain. You have a second monomer also which contains an alpha chain, so 2 alpha, and there'll be another third one monomer that contains a beta chain. Draw one here, and another monomer that contains a beta chain. Okay, this is Fe2 plus, Fe2 plus, Fe2 plus. Okay, so 2 alpha and 2 beta chains. Okay, and these four combine together to form hemoglobin A. Okay, so this is what it means when they say it contains 2 alpha and 2 beta globin chains. Okay, so this is a piece of information that you can note down if you like. This is about how the hemoglobin molecule is structured. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next question then. All right. How the transport of O2 and CO2 by blood happens? And this appeared in 1996. Let's look at our options. Again, pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer and come back. All right. A. With the help of WBCs and blood serum? No. With the help of platelets and corpuscles? No. With the help of RBCs and blood plasma? Yes. With the help of RBCs and WBCs? No. So your answer should be C. No doubt about it. Okay, because now I'm sure you must be familiar with how the O2 and CO2 transport happens in the blood. So clearly with the help of RBCs and blood plasma. Very simple. This was direct. This shouldn't have been a problem for you guys to answer. Okay, this was quite simple. Let's look at the discussion. So here you have two tables in front of you. If you like, you can note it down in your books so to help you easily understand. So oxygen transport in blood, 3% of oxygen dissolved in the plasma, and 97% is carried by hemoglobin, okay, in erythrocytes. And CO2, 7% of CO2 is transported in the blood plasma, 23% by hemoglobin, and 70% in the form of bicarbonate ions. Okay, so again, this is factual based. You should have been able to answer this quite easily. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. Okay, 8. At high altitude, the RBCs in the human blood will, and this appeared in 1995. Okay, let's look at our options first. We have A, B, C, and D. Again, pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer and come back. Okay. A, increase in number. Yes. If you've written A, yes, you got the right answer. B, decrease in number. No. Increase in size. No. Decrease in size. No. So your answer should have been A. Clearly, should have been A. This was a good question. This deserves a smiley. Okay, so you needed to understand the physiology before you can answer this question. Okay, so how the body behaves at high altitude. Okay, let's look at the discussion. Okay, at high altitudes, hypoxia occurs. Hypoxia occurs when the cells are not given enough oxygen. Okay, the cells are not given, or the cells, the blood is not able to transport enough oxygen to the tissues or cells. Okay, and this occurs due to low pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere, and this affects the oxygen saturation in hemoglobin. So one thing after another. So at high altitudes, that means when you go up to the mountain region or very high altitudes there, so hypoxia occurs. Okay, and this is due to low PO2. Okay, low pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere. So it becomes very difficult for you to breathe. Okay, and this in turn affects the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin, HGB. Okay, this affects the oxygen saturation in hemoglobin. So again, your cells are not getting enough oxygen. Okay, I'll erase this part. So now to acclimatize to higher altitudes, okay, one of the effects is that blood forming organs begin to produce large quantities of RBCs. Okay, so now there are many changes that are happening when you go to a higher altitude. Immediately your body needs to acclimatize to that condition. Okay, and there are many changes happening in the body. One of those changes or one of the effects is that blood forming organs begin to produce large quantities of RBCs. Okay, and this condition is called secondary polycythemia. This is an extra piece of information. Okay, this condition where the body is able to form large quantities of RBCs, this condition is called secondary polycythemia. Oops. So, like I said, this is what happens at higher altitudes and how the body changes. So the answer to your question should have been increase in number. Okay, so for that you should have been able to understand what happens to the body at high altitudes. Okay, because of which then RBC in the human blood will increase in number. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. All right, 9. Although much CO2 is carried in blood, yet blood does not become acidic. And this appeared in 1995. Let's look at our options. Okay, so A. CO2 is continuously diffused through the tissues and is not allowed to accumulate. In CO2 transport, blood buffers play an important role. C. CO2 is absorbed by the leukocytes. D. CO2 combines with water to form H2CO3, which is neutralized by NaCO3. Again, I would suggest you pause the video and come back to this question and then check your answer. So your answer actually should have been B. In CO2 transport, blood buffers play an important role. Okay, it is important to understand how buffers play an important role in your body. Now let's look at the discussion. Okay, we are aware of the fact that 70% of CO2 is transported as bicarbonate ions. So this is a majority part. 70% is a majority part of CO2 that is transported as bicarbonate ions. Okay. Now the role of the buffer system in the body is to maintain the H plus ion concentration. Now I don't mean video buffering, your YouTube video buffering. Okay. This, you have a whole buffer system inside your body, in your blood. Okay. This is continuously happening inside. Okay. To maintain a constant pH balance in your body. Okay. So the role of this buffer system in the body is to maintain the H plus ion concentration. Okay, it needs to maintain this H plus ion concentration. Now we'll see how. Now, first, there are different ways with the body, how the body maintains that H plus ion concentration. The first one is the chemical acid base buffer system of the body fluids. It's a chemical acid base buffer. There's a reaction happening inside your body fluids, okay, that helps maintain the H plus ion concentration, and this occurs within seconds. So if there is an imbalance in your system, this occurs within seconds. It will try to maintain the balance again. Okay, so this is a very quick method of the body. It's like a defense mechanism. So if the H plus ion concentration increases, it will quickly react and it will bring down the H plus ion concentration. Okay, we'll see how in some time. That is why I said the role of the buffer system in the body is to maintain the H plus ion concentration. So the first way your body tries to defend itself if there is an imbalance is by the chemical acid base buffer system of the body fluids, which begins in seconds. Okay, so you know this reaction. I'm sure you are aware of this reaction. You have been studying this reaction so many times. Okay, this is how bicarbonate ions are produced to help transport CO2, right? Bicarbonate ions are produced. So you know CO2 plus water will produce carbonic acid, and then that will dissociate to form HCO3 minus and H plus. Now you notice one thing, this arrow is actually smaller than the arrow below. Okay, and there's a reason why this arrow is small. That means when carbonic acid dissociate, there's a very low tendency of H plus ions to produce. Okay, the H plus ion basically what it means is the H plus ions are small or low in concentration. Okay, so in nature there is a tendency for H plus ions to produce in a lower concentration, an extremely small concentration. This is nature. Okay, so it does not become acidic. Okay, now what you see the reaction over here is this bicarbonate ion in the extracellular fluid combines with sodium and it is transported as NaHCO3. Okay, this is for your information. So here let's come back to this chemical acid base buffer. H plus ions are produced in smaller quantities. This is in nature. Okay, now let me take another. Now what happens if H plus ions suddenly increase? Okay, there could be a situation where H plus ions suddenly increase. This could be due to acidosis. This could be due to some kind of food that you have consumed which is very acidic. So H plus ion will increase. Okay, now then what happens? Okay, so now to balance that, the reaction will move to the left. To balance that out, reaction will move to the left. That means it will bind with HCO3 minus to form H2CO3 and then to form carbon dioxide and water. And this carbon dioxide needs to be eliminated. out of your body. Okay, this carbon dioxide needs to be then eliminated out of your body. That means your rate of ventilation will begin to increase, okay, because of that reason. So when the H plus ion, now I'm sure you know how reversible reactions function. Okay, you can speak to your chemistry teacher, La Chatelier's principle, if I got the spelling right. La Chatelier's principle explains how reversible reactions are balanced out, okay, how they function. So in nature, everything needs to be balanced out. You can't allow imbalance to happen. If an imbalance happens, then there is a defense mechanism of the body, okay, to protect you. So now when H plus ions increase, the reaction moves to the left, producing more carbon dioxide. And this reaction occurs in seconds. That is why I mentioned it in seconds. It's so quick. Okay. Now, this is the first method. Second is respiratory system, which occurs in minutes. Okay. So, respiratory system, once a CO2 is formed, the CO2 needs to be eliminated out of your system. Okay, it needs to go out. Eliminated. So, your breathing increases, your rate of breathing increases. So, rate of ventilation increases, okay, to remove all the excess CO2, okay, that your body does not need. Third one is your kidneys. The kidneys is actually the most effective way. The kidneys, but they function from after hours to days. It does not work immediately like the chemical acid base buffer. Now, the chemical acid base buffer and respiratory system are immediate, like seconds and minutes, you see a reaction happening. But the kidneys, they take hours to days, and they are the most effective one because they remove all the excess H plus ions. Okay, they remove all the excess H plus ions, okay, through your urine. Okay, so that is how a overall balance is maintained. So you see this reaction over here. Take another pen. You see this whole reaction over here, you must be familiar with this, but you didn't realize that this whole reaction that is taking place in the blood is actually a buffer system. Okay, and this prevents the blood to become acidic with the CO2 transport. Okay, this is quite an interesting piece of information. So if you want, you can note down the information in your book. And this question deserves a smiley face. Okay, this question deserves a smiley face because this is very important piece of information. Okay, and how your body is balancing everything out. Now this whole buffer system is called the bicarbonate buffer system. Okay, bicarbonate buffer system. It's interesting how the body reacts and how it functions. You wouldn't have imagined something like, system actually going on inside you, in seconds, in minutes, in days and hours, So it's quite an interesting and important piece of information to be able to understand. So this was not a direct question. So there wouldn't be any direct answer to this. So you'll have to apply your knowledge to this question. Okay, so I hope you've understood this, and we'll move on to the next question. Oh yes, one more piece of information. So like I said, when strong acid is added, it results in acidosis, and the bicarbonate ions react with the H plus ions to balance. I'll erase this so you can take a clear look. This is essentially the same thing that I have just said. So when strong acid is added, so strong acid over here increases resulting in acidosis. So the bicarbonates react with the H plus ions to balance out the acidity by forming CO2 and water, which I essentially explained to you. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Okay, question number 10. The carbon dioxide is transported via blood to lungs mostly. Okay, this appeared in 1995. Let's look at our options. A. In combination with hemoglobin only. B. Dissolved in blood plasma. C. In the form of bicarbonate ions. And D. As carbaminohemoglobin and as carbonic acid. Okay, so again pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer and then come back to this. So the carbon dioxide is transported via blood to lungs mostly in the form of bicarbonate ions. Simple. This was pretty direct. Let's look at the discussion. I mean, till now this should have been etched in your brain, this piece of information. So 7% of CO2 is transported in the blood plasma, 23% of CO2 is carried by the hemoglobin, and 70% is transported in the form of bicarbonate ions. Okay, so this was a pretty direct question, so you should have been able to answer this quite easily. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question number 11. Carbon dioxide is transported from tissues to the respiratory surface by only, and this appeared in 1993. Okay, let's look at our options. Okay, so again pause the video and write down your answer. Come back to this. A. Plasma and erythrocytes. Yes, carbon dioxide is transported from tissues to respiratory surface by only plasma and erythrocytes. Plasma, option B plasma, option C erythrocytes, D erythrocytes and leukocytes, which is incorrect. So your answer should have been A. This again is a direct question. I don't think I need much explaining to do in this. So you have your again data in front of you. 7% is transported in blood plasma, 23% by hemoglobin, and 70% of CO2 transported in the form of bicarbonate ions. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, question number 12. When you hold your breath, which of the following gas changes in blood would first lead to the urge to breathe? Okay, and this appeared in 2015. Okay, let's look at our options A, B, C and D. Again, pause the video and think about your answer and then come back to this. Okay, option A, falling CO2 concentration. B, rising CO2 and falling O2 concentration. C, falling O2 concentration. D, rising CO2 concentration. If you know your theory very well, you should have been able to answer that D is the right answer. Okay, you should have chosen or selected D, option D as your right answer. So rising CO2 concentration is the reason the gas change in blood that happens, which would first lead to the urge to breathe. Let's look at the explanation. Okay. Now, in the brain, there is a chemosensitive area which is present beneath the ventral surface of the medulla. So you have your medulla. Okay. It has a medulla. Okay, looks so at the ventral surface there is a chemosensitive area over here. Okay, and it is highly sensitive to changes in arterial PCO2 blood of the blood or hydrogen ion concentration. So this section or this part is highly sensitive to changes in the PCO2. Arterial PCO2, okay, that means arterial blood PCO2 and or H plus ion concentration. Okay, so it's very sensitive. This chemosensitive area is very sensitive to the arterial blood PCO2. Now, hydrogen ions do not easily cross the blood-brain barrier unlike CO2. Okay, so now when you're holding your breath, okay, automatically the PCO2 will begin to increase, right? The CO2 will begin to increase, H plus ion also will begin to increase, okay? Now the arterial blood that passes through, in this case, there's a blood-brain barrier over here. Okay, I will show you in the next section. Okay, this is a better representation. You have your arterial blood. Okay, so you have high CO2 over here and you have your blood-brain barrier over here. Okay, now what happens is H plus ions are not able to cross that. H plus ions are not able to cross this blood-brain barrier, but CO2 can easily cross. CO2 can easily cross, get past this blood-brain barrier and enter this chemosensitive region, okay, of the brain. So what happens inside that? Again, CO2 combines with water to form H2CO3, which then forms H plus and HCO3 minus. Although H plus ions cannot pass the barrier, but CO2 can pass and then forms H plus ions inside that chemosensitive area. So this activates the chemosensitive area and then activates the dorsal group of neurons. DGN is dorsal group of neurons. Okay, so DGN is dorsal group of neurons and this H plus then activates that, okay, in turn, and this then controls the rate of ventilation. Okay, this in turn eventually controls the rate of ventilation. All right, so this is what is actually happening. Okay, so CO2, when you hold your breath, the CO2 levels increase and this arterial blood that is passing by, CO2 will cross this blood-brain barrier, move in, and then it combines with the water here to form H2CO3 and then H plus and then HCO3 minus. So it's H plus eventually that is activating the chemosensitive area and then activates the DGN. But paradoxically, it cannot pass through the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so this is the reason why this is a gas change. Sorry, that to answer your question, the reason that the gas changes is the CO2 levels. Okay, the CO2 level, rising CO2 level causes you the first urge for you to breathe. Okay, so that is a mechanism behind that, why it is happening. If we look back at a theory, erase this part. So, like I said, carbon dioxide reacts with water from extracellular fluid to form carbonic acid, which dissociates to form H plus and bicarbonate ions. And these hydrogen ions then stimulate the respiratory center, the DGN. Okay, like I previously said. So, this is what is actually happening. Okay, the rising CO2 levels is what is urging you to breathe, and this is what is happening inside the respiratory center of your brain. Okay, I hope you've understood this, and this is the end to this video presentation, and I hope you've enjoyed this and I hope you've learned something new from this. And I will see you again in the next video lecture, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to MJ NEET Biology. All right, bye.